Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. This week I am talking with James Hudson about the book The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. James has been in libraries since 1997. He is a devoted husband and proud dad to two talented and artistic teenage girls. He loves a good time, good people, and being outside. Currently, he's on a mission to hike and visit every Virginia state park. He still frequents skate parks with friends, grinding and catching air. He likes to play tennis on Tuesdays and is currently reading Anthem by Noah Hawley. Also, a deep cut from James is that he loves pickle slices on his pizza. James and I have been friends and collaborators professionally for a long time. This was a really fun conversation. He is the chillest person I know. And hearing him talk about the impact that Salinger's work had on his life was really moving. And I hope that you enjoy listening to us chat. And also, we recorded on St. Patrick's Day, so we had to have a Guinness, which is, let's be honest, the least phony of beers and something Holden Caulfield would respect. So enjoy.
Now, what podcasts inspired you to want to be a podcaster?
Well, Bill has actually been pushing me to do something like this for a while.
You are a great conversationalist.
Oh, you're very kind. So it was something, I had a blog. I still have a blog. I don't post on it very often. It's fancylibrarian.com.
Okay.
And for a while I was always posting book reviews, and then that kind of fell off. I want to say the pandemic fell off, but I don't know. I think I also just got busy.
Sure.
And I do something kind of similar to the drinks, pairing the drinks and books for my neighborhood book club.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill kept being you need to do something where you try to do this. I mean, I'm not trying to say at this point I'm trying to do it professionally. Obviously, I still have a job that I love and it pays me. Mm-hmm. But he kept suggesting, and I was I don't know, I wasn't very good at the blog. I couldn't get my head off the blog idea. But then once I was an opportunity to talk to other people about their favorite books, I love this. Having you over and having a drink and talking about hearing you. It's
pretty fun. I mean,
it's pretty fun.
We are in that field, and we don't get to do it as much as we would like to. So,
yeah.
When you asked me, I was oh my gosh, talk about my favorite book. I
mm-hmm.
love that. I love that. It's that same when we're at work and the opportunity arises. It's just makes your day.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. So to me, doing this is not work. So then once I had once I thought I could record me talking to people about books, it was just.
Well, everybody needs some
easy.
Sort of creative outlet.
Yeah.
And, this is just a different vehicle. It's a new 21st century vehicle. I love it.
Well, yeah, well, thank you. So it's been fun, and I think that's the most important thing is that I actually enjoy doing it. It's not a slog to do it, and I like the editing part too.
Cool.
And I've learned a ton.
I bet. I can only imagine what that part of it's like.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff, have you ever done anything? You're into music, right? But I don't know if you've done this side of GarageBand or.
I have not.
It's
very rudimentary.
You would think, I've got a mixer over here. You would think that you just plug in the mics.
Just hit play.
And hit record. Hit record, and it just goes. And it's no, you have to know all this other stuff.
Sure.
And, there's even, now, even though I'm pretty confident in what I'm doing with it, yesterday, before I had my interview then, I had like a moment of panic because I was like, why isn't the audio working? And it was because I had plugged the jack into the wrong port on my laptop. And so.
Yeah. Simple mistake.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's all very exciting. All right. So first thing, I'm here with you today, James Hudson. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And what book are we talking about today?
I chose Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger.
Okay. Perennial classic, literally.
It is a classic. I think it's on some of the top books ever lists.
That you have to read.
That's right.
And we paired it with
Guinness in honor of St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, so we're recording today.
That's right.
March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Cheers.
Cheers. That's good.
I hadn't actually had a Guinness in a long time. I think I might have mentioned it. I don't drink beer often. So, but...
trying to choose a drink for this book, I sort of struggled, looking it up. And there is a drink called Catcher in the Rye. And it had lots of ingredients. And, one of the main ingredients... Well, there were many different versions of the drink too, so I was like, which one is the correct one? And then rye being the main ingredient, I don't really like whiskey.
That's not your style.
It's not my thing. And then there is a scene in the book where he's the main character is drinking a scotch and water, and I don't really like scotch either, so I sort of struggled with the drink to pair with the book today. But as it turns out, it's St. Patrick's Day, so I was like, oh, let's celebrate it with some Guinness.
I love it. And also, I think, Guinness, it's on the bottle.
Yes.
1759. It's a classic.
Classic beer.
It's also, I was thinking about it, and the big theme of the book is Holden Caulfield criticizing phoniness.
That's right.
And, a Guinness is probably like the most real beer you can get. It's not a super high. I never thought of it
like that. Yeah, you're right.
It's not a super high alcohol content.
Yeah.
It's one of the lighter ones you can get, even though it's very dark.
It's really smooth. It has a nice texture. It has a nice taste.
Yeah, it's not overwhelming at all. It's beautiful. And are you Irish?
I am not. No. I am not. My wife is a little bit Irish.
Okay.
So in our younger days, we used to celebrate St. Patrick's Day in the crowds.
Go to Churchill?
Actually, I've never been down to the Churchill one.
I haven't either.
But I see the things on the social medias about it. It looks very big and very popular.
Yeah, maybe a little overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, we are, Bill is making corned beef.
Corned beef and in cabbage?
I hate cabbage.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Yeah, so I'm making mashed potatoes.
Cool.
And I feel like my mother is Irish.
Sure.
So I'm actually pretty Irish. I have all my cousins all have red hair, and anyway.
That's awesome. But I've always wanted to go to Ireland.
I do too. I've never been.
Another one of my favorite books is Ulysses and Portrait of the Artist of the Young Man. I love that whole James Joyce thing.
Okay. I never knew that about you. That Ulysses is your favorite book.
No, it's not my favorite book.
Oh, okay.
I like that book. I do like that book. That is not my favorite book.
Okay. Well,
I think I even like Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man a little bit better.
Okay.
And then there's Dubliners too.
Right.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
But even I had a good friend who read Ulysses just to be able to say that he read it, and he said it was a slog to get through.
It's a difficult book, and it takes place in one day. It's just a very long book.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm just impressed that you read it and then that you liked it.
I got really into English was my major, so I really got into the reading and.
Yeah. Well, I'm also an English major. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed that book.
Yeah, I did.
And I guess it brings us to our book, and I always
Catcher in the Rye.
The Catcher in the Rye.
So many things to talk about with this book. What you were saying. Choose a book that's close to you, maybe your favorite book, or had an impact, and definitely, I don't like to say favorites. I do
Yeah.
have a lot of favorite things, but to say a favorite book, that's difficult. But this one definitely had an impact on me in many ways. So I thought that would be fun to talk about the experience with that, because it ties
Absolutely.
into libraries and
Yeah.
ties into reading. So there's many different ways we could talk about this book, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it had a big impact on you. Who were you when you read this?
Who was I when I first read this? So when I first read this book, I think I was either 15 or 16, and that's the same age as Holden Caulfield when he's in this book. And I'll just never forget a very good friend of mine. We were hanging out in his room, and at this point, I wasn't a reader at all. Reading was just not even on my radar. And he was like, "James, have you read this book?" And it was a copy very similar to this. This is I feel like the popular version.
Yes.
That's the the paperback.
Yeah.
With the maroon cover, with the yellow Georgian
just
type. It's
very
very
simple.
simple, and it's like it's a mystery. And I remember it was faded and it was all crinkled, and he was like, "You've got to read this book." And I grew up in a very small town.
Okay. Do you want to tell us where you grew up?
In Virginia. Grew up in a small town in Virginia, and I would say like end to end, it was like 10 miles from end to end, right? So you could literally, like, I was a skateboarder. I am a skateboarder.
A skateboarder.
Yes. And you could literally skateboard from one end to the town to the other. And the public library was practically right in the center of town. So for me, it was this, what do I want to say? It was like an oasis, It was like this place I could stop and, go in and just relax, get into the AC. I could get a drink of water, so I would skateboard from, different, to the different ends of the town and stop there on my way home. And shortly after that conversation with my friend, I actually went into the book stacks and looked for a book, probably the first time. And I remember seeing it on the shelf, and it was just it's a thin book. So it was right there on the shelf, almost hidden. And I remember pulling it out, and in the back, remember back in the day in libraries, they had the date due in the back of it, and it was full. I mean, it had been checked out 100,000 times.
Yeah.
It was so full, and I was like, wow, I'm on to something here. This book is, people know about this book. This is a special book. So that's kind of where I was when I first read this book. So I read it, at the age of the Holden Caulfield in the book.
Right.
And it just had a profound impact on me. I feel like this is the book that got me interested in reading, just because of the way it made me feel, and I was able to associate with some of the characters in the book, and I think it changed my life in that sort of a way. And then if I think about it too, working in libraries, just how special that library experience was too. Finding that book that made a real difference for me.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that, I think a lot of teachers or educators do they put this book on the reading list because of what you're talking about.
Yes.
Because it is a story that, a young person can connect to and maybe encourage people that might not be readers.
Sure. I think, it was probably intentionally written as sort of this adult novel for adults, but reading it and just associating with it in such a way, I think that's why it attracts sort of younger readers. And I remember reading it and not even really understanding it the first time. I just had that connection to it, that feeling of oh, I'm not alone. He's got these similar thoughts of, adolescence and adulthood. And nothing really happens in this book. Honestly, there's not much of a plot. Like, it takes place over like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, it's like a weekend, right?
And he starts off, kind of talking in retrospect. He's narrating it. This happened last year, sort of before Christmas, but then gets into the story, which lasts 2.5 days or so. And a lot happens, but it's not very linear, and trying to digest what was happening that first time, I probably missed a lot. So I think I probably read it immediately again to try to digest it a little bit better. And then I didn't really read it again until college. And I took an American fiction class and we studied it. And I remember being really excited about that because I loved that book.
Yeah. Walk us through what happens in the story.
So in the story, it starts off with him just getting back from New York. I think it's the Saturday, and he's being expelled from the prep school he's attending, and he just lost all of the fencing equipment on the subway, so the entire team was mad at him, and they came back early.
Yeah.
And there's a big football game going on, so he's he doesn't want to be at the football game because it's full of phonies. So because he's being expelled, he what happens? He goes to visit a teacher, I think, and the teacher kind of his history teacher gives him some sort of sage advice about his future because he is being expelled.
How does Holden? I don't think he takes that advice well, though, right?
No, I think it kind of made him sort of angry and resentful. And then I think he returns to his room, and this is a part of the book I really like. His roommate doesn't like his roommate. I think his roommate's name was Stradlater. Yeah. And I feel like everybody knows a Stradlater, But I remember, he's kind of like the good-looking guy and the always put together, but behind the scenes he's like kind of sloppy and just not very cool. And he asks, I think he's going to go out on a date with a girl that Holden used to like. Yeah. So that kind of upsets Holden. And he also asks Holden, because the only class that Holden was passing was English, so he asked him to write an essay for him the next day, which he agrees to do.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know. You know what I was hoping we could talk a little bit, and I don't know if this is skipping around or not.
No.
To break up the continuity. It's just like the cover. Can we talk about book covers for a second? Well, this for me is an iconic cover, the maroon with the font, and then it's not the original cover. I don't know too much about Salinger, but I don't think he liked the cover very much or liked any of the covers. But the original cover has this sort of like horse on it.
I think
with the New York in the background.
The cover with the horse on it, I think, is from the scene at the end.
The carousel.
He takes his sister.
Yes.
What's his sister's name?
Phoebe.
Yeah, she has a really cool name.
Phoebe.
And
it's a cool name.
She's on the carousel, and I think she's a 10-year-old.
Yes, so I think that's the, I always took it as the carousel, and I just like the sort of the looseness of the drawing, with the New York in the background. I don't know why he would not like it, and I don't think it's too much of a giveaway.
No, and I think, like I said it, and I'm not the first person to say it, it's symbolism. The symbolism is childhood.
Yeah, exactly. The adolescence to adulthood, the loss of innocence, and universal theme. Yeah, and I feel like this book, just captures it so well. That's why it's so popular.
Right.
Because he really struggles with it throughout the entire book. He goes back and forth. And he calls everybody phony throughout the entire book. But then he himself flip-flops like every scene. He's back and forth too.
Right.
So
I guess it's typical teenager, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're trying to find your way, and maybe you idealize who you want to be. So you don't want to be a phony, but then you don't have the introspection to see that your actions are.
Yeah. You're learning your way.
Yeah. Which is your preferred cover? The maroon?
I think the maroon, because that's my very first memory.
Yeah.
And it's just the simplicity of it, you know, and that font to this day. Georgia is my favorite font. You know, Georgian,
yeah.
And
Do you use that regularly?
I do. I think I do kind of gravitate towards that.
I might try it. I've been thinking about switching up my email font.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll switch over to...
What's your font? Papyrus.
It also starts with a G.
Garamond.
Garamond.
That's a good one. They're sort of similar.
Yeah.
Sort of similar.
I don't know. I've had the Garamond for such like
Sure.
a manager. We're both library managers. This is such like a library manager conversation.
I know. I love.
What's your font?
Did you ever see that skit, Papyrus?
No.
On Saturday Night Live.
I don't remember.
You gotta
I mean, I know
YouTube
what
it.
Papyrus looks like.
You gotta YouTube it. It's funny.
Okay.
It's so funny. I can't do it justice. But we always joke about it at work too. Like, what font should we do? I'm like, Papyrus. What's his name? Oh man, he was in Barbie.
Oh, Ryan Gosling. Yeah.
He does this thing where he's like it's just funny. Yeah, I can't do it.
Okay, I will definitely watch that. I love Ryan Gosling.
It wakes him up in
hilarious.
the middle of the night.
Okay, but all right, so you like the maroon. I can't remember. I read this book in high school, and
Sure.
I same thing. I read it in college too. I think my first cover was also the maroon.
Yeah, it's such a
And
just
yellow.
classic. It's just classic. You can see it from the other side of a library or the other side of a room and just know what book that is. That
Yeah.
maroon and yellow. And, you know, I collect records. There's a couple of bands that, like, mock it, you know, on there. Like, give it a nod. And just so influential.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do love a good cover, you know. Fortunate enough to work in a library, see a lot of covers.
Right.
And me and my sort of colleagues always point out a good cover. You know, I know you can't judge a book by its cover, but
everybody does.
You can appreciate a good cover, you know. And covers nowadays there's some good ones, you know, a lot of that embossing and like different sort of paper that they use and sort of secret things. So I'm flipping through this book and there's notes in the sides.
And this is your
This
copy?
is not my copy.
Oh.
Like, you know, and whenever this is a book that I actually collect, whenever I see a copy of, I will grab because I love to give them to people.
I'm the
right?
same way.
Yeah. So when you know, like, I love the beat up ones, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love finding stuff in books, you know, and like, oh man, I could just spend an afternoon reading these notes in the side. I'm gonna have to check that out. I love that.
To look at all the notes that somebody left.
Yeah, I mean, it looks
That's
like maybe
cool.
someone's college or high school edition, and yeah, look at it. There's this, and it's all in, you know, cursive.
In
So,
pencil, it looks like.
That's right.
That's really cool. And I do this, like I said, I do the same thing, especially like I'll go on the Friends book sale and they sell their books for like $1 to $2. And
sure.
I'll go and I'll just, every time they restock, I'll go look and see what's on there. And if definitely if it's something I've already read,
Yeah.
I'll grab it because I like to be able to give it.
I love giving books out.
Yeah.
And I love signing the books when you give the books, you know, like
Yeah.
a little message, you know. So I was going to give you one of these today
Oh
in
my
the front.
gosh,
you know?
that's so sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I don't have my own copy. I know I do somewhere. It was when we moved to this house like a billion years ago. I had all my books because I was younger and closer
Sure.
to my college years. So I had, you know, I had these books, and then Bill was like, isn't the benefit of you working in a library that we don't have to slog around 700 pounds of books?
I totally can relate. At one point, we moved a couple of years ago, and I got rid of probably 6 or 7 bins
Yeah.
worth of books, and I still have a ton of books.
Yeah.
You know, I like kept the essentials, and it slowly, you know, ballooned just a little bit. But we got a
Yeah.
new bookcase recently, which helped alleviate that. But yeah, I do love. This is one of the books I'll grab. Don't make fun of me. I'm going to say it. Infinite Jest. I love that book too, and that's a crazy
Wow.
difficult book.
Yeah.
But whenever I see a copy of it, I will grab it because I love to give that book away as a gift.
Wow.
And that's a book I say when you read, you just have to kind of read throughout your life. Like just slowly chip away at it and just
Yeah.
never stop because that's a crazy book too. I like sort of difficult books sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just
Do you enjoy them while you're reading them?
I do. I love I really want to get to what the author is the message they're trying to get across. Like what are they trying to say here?
Yeah.
So I'll read it nice and slow. One of the things I was hoping we could talk about today is I feel like I'm your average reader, right? I'm not your average library reader.
Okay.
I feel like I'm surrounded by, avid readers. And I feel like I am an avid reader, but I'm a slow reader. And I feel like I was sort of late to the game as well,
Yeah.
So my goal for Goodreads is, you want to guess what my goal is?
I don't want to I don't want to guess because if you're reading Infinite Jest and
no,
Ulysses.
20.
20. That's
20.
pretty good.
20.
Okay.
And I'm not going to cheat, but I am going to count this as
absolutely.
one,
And you can go on, so Goodreads, you can go on there and you can just re-add the dates.
Yes.
For when you reread something. So I definitely think you should.
Yeah.
I'm
they behind them. I'm only on 3, so last year was 12, which I nailed. I got 14.
Okay.
So I was I'm up and I'm gonna do 20.
Okay.
But I'm still only at 3.
Well, the average American reads 12 books a year.
Yeah. See, I feel like I'm average. I'm average.
Well, but the average American is, like I said, not reading Ulysses or Infinite Jest. So there's a little difference.
Yeah. You'll never guess what book I grabbed on Friday to start reading next. The next book I want to read is H is for Hawk.
I keep picking up. That's one of Bill's favorite books.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. We'll have to talk about it.
Yeah.
There's so many hawks in this area.
Yes, there are. We have a red-shouldered hawk that lives in our neighborhood.
That's awesome.
It's really cool.
But the book after that I got, and that'll be weeks away, so I might lose interest. But David Copperfield.
Okay.
Because
the beginning, the first chapter,
the first sentence. So I was also hoping not to derail the conversation.
I love this. This is great.
But not only do I love a good cover, I love a good first sentence.
I love it too. All right, so let's.
This first sentence.
Will you read it?
I will read it.
Okay.
All right. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it if you really want to know the truth. Right?
That
just sets it up.
It does set it up. It's very, that's that's his attitude.
That's his attitude. And then I was flipping through the book earlier today. And do you ever look at the last sentence?
I haven't. What's the last sentence?
Oh, this is a beautiful last sentence.
I'm going to turn to my copy here.
Don't ever tell anybody anything. If you do, you'll just start missing everybody.
Oh.
Right? So a first sentence.
Little
so whenever...
Right.
If the cover has attracted me to pick it up and what's this book about, I will always go to the first sentence just to see if it hooks me.
If I think an author is serious about their story, I feel this first sentence, it's like, what is it, curb appeal that you have for your home that, realtors talk about. The first sentence is the curb appeal. You have to create it and style it in a way that tells somebody where they're going.
That first sentence, I'm interested. I've never read David Copperfield.
I haven't either.
And I would imagine, I guess it's going to be the opposite of this, or...
I don't know. I haven't read it either. So, but it's...
It's another large book.
It's another big book, yeah. And
like 800 pages or something.
And this is a story about basically kind of a rich prep school kid.
That's right.
And his disillusionment. Whereas David Copperfield is about someone from not a lot of means.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
But I'm excited for you.
Yes, I'll let you know if I end up getting to it.
So
The Catcher in the Rye.
The Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye.
I have on my question. So what is the vibe of this book? We've kind of talked about, hovered around it.
The vibe. So how would I articulate that? It has all these experiences that are not really connected over this 2-day period, but I feel like he gets sadder and sadder throughout these experiences, you know, like I don't think any of these experiences he leaves very happy, but then afterwards he starts to go through some introspection about it and then like maybe changes his mind about it. So he's just really struggling with, I feel like his age and where he's at and where he's just trying to figure out like what's it all about, like, and where he's going. So, you know, I feel like that's why it really spoke to me at that time, because I was having those same exact feelings of just like, what's it all about? You're on the, you know, the cusp of becoming this adult and all these responsibilities and, you know, what's it all about? Where are you going? You know?
Yeah.
I feel like I like to think it has a, you know, at the end, there is this like, you know, this acceptance of it, and it's going to be okay with, you know, with Phoebe and the carousel. So I feel it does have a positive ending that could probably be interpreted that he doesn't really change, but I don't know. I like to think he does change. So just that vibe of trying to figure it out. It's hard. It's tough. And, you know, rereading this book, you know, it's an okay book. It had such an impact on me. That's why I chose it. But reading it now, you know, I don't enjoy it the same. You know, I see him differently. And I think that's part of the appeal of the book, too, as well. Like, it could be one of those, you know, different... You know, it's like food. Like, you know, your tastes change,
right?
Your interests change. So, I don't know where I was going with that thought.
Well, I think it's always interesting to reread something you loved as a young person, and then to go back and read it later, and to see it. I mean, because you do change, and your perspective changes so much, and I think that's something really important too, is to have stories that people can relate to. Like, not everybody. A lot of people understand that we're all different and we all have different perspectives and we all have different life journeys and experiences. But like, to have something like this that isn't maybe meant for you and I in adulthood, it's meant for a young person. Sure.
But there is this part of me that makes me remember that time as well, and how difficult it was. And I'm so far from that now, right? Where like that, like almost feels like I was a completely different person than I was. And that I feel like that's a beautiful sentiment too, you know, like, you know, we all evolve, we all change through experiences, and, you know, you come out on the other side. Like, you know, I really associate, you know, he gets in some trouble into this book and gets into some no good. And I felt like I was right there alongside with him at that time, you know, like, I was, you know, I had troubles as a child, you know, as a kid. And, you know, the sentiment of, you know, there's others out there like that. Like, I didn't have that, you know, you don't get that in movies. You don't get that in book or music, but like the book it just took me right there to like hear someone that's experiencing those same sort of sentiments and those same feelings.
Yeah.
So, and then now kind of remembering that like takes me back to that time, and like I said, it was just so different that, you know, got to remember those, you know, that loss of innocence, that loss of adolescence.
Right.
So, you know.
sad. It's
Yeah,
sad, but
sad.
it's beautiful. It's like
It is.
it is truly bittersweet.
It's life, you know. It's you got to take the good with the bad. So.
Right. Absolutely. So we've talked about Holden as a character. Are there any other characters you'd like to?
Holden Caulfield, main character. Some of the other characters I liked. Let me think. I definitely like Phoebe and his relationship to Phoebe. Phoebe is his younger sister, who I think is 10 years old, who he's very protective of, and she looks up to Holden. And there's a few special moments at the end of the book with Phoebe. And who else in the book? There's his brother D.B., who you never meet in the book, but he only talks about. There's this lovely moment in the book when going back to that one scene where he's writing the essay for his roommate. That's about his older brother. I think Allie is the name of the older brother who had passed away with leukemia, but it was this beautiful essay about Allie's baseball mitt. And you can tell that he was really close with Allie.
Yeah.
And I think the family are like my favorite characters with Holden. You know, it did seem that a lot of the people he did meet in the city and at school were phonies. Phonies. And I remember when going back to reading that book the first time, and you know, the word phony it seemed like such a 50s
I was about
fake
to say,
word. And the dialogue in the book was, you know, it didn't bother me. I did get like chuckles out of it. I remember reading it, you know, and this was in the like early 90s, you know, so the dialogue was so different, but I got a kick out of it. I really did.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, it was published, I guess, in 1951.
1951, yes.
And I do ask on here, what do we know about the author? But so I'm jumping into this a little bit because he wrote these I think were originally, some of them were New Yorker stories.
I think a lot of his stuff were like New Yorker stories and then put together. You know, he's written 9 stories, which were 9 different New Yorker stories. And then I think Franny and Zoe, which is another one of his books, each were New Yorker stories.
Yeah.
So I think like probably chapters maybe of Catcher in the Rye were in the New Yorker, not the whole thing, but I think that was his style. So yeah, I think, you know, he's J.D. Salinger is you know, was like a recluse, but because of that, like, it was sought out, so he was sort of a famous recluse.
Yeah.
You know, so that's interesting. You know, was it because so many people were, you know, enamored with Catcher in the Rye that kind of, you know, seeked him out? And
I do feel like this, and I don't know if this is my perception of knowing about him and his history, is like, I feel like this story is a little autobiographical of his perception and his sort of, I mean, I could definitely see Holden Caulfield being turned off by people, you know, being interested in his life and thinking that these are phonies or fakes, and I'm just a normal dude, and all these people are acting like I'm so great, and I just want to like live my life quietly.
Yeah.
He also, I think, struggled with mental illness.
Sure.
Similarly, well, I know that Ernest Hemingway was a like mentor for him. He was a big Hemingway
I didn't know that.
fan, and I believe he was in an inpatient facility for mental health issues, and he wrote to Hemingway saying like, I am really worried about the public finding out about this because it's going to, you know, at that time it was so stigmatized to, you know, say that you suffer from any of this stuff, which now we're so much more open about it.
Absolutely. And this story and his other stories are just so, you know, psychoanalyzed and just you know, interpreted that.
But yeah, I guess he's from New York, and he also died in New England.
Yes.
I remember when he died. He died in 2010, I want to say.
Nice.
I
mean, not nice, but like
earlier in that year.
He must have been
in his 80s or 90s.
In his 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
I think he was in World War II, right?
Yes.
Where I've heard
He was
Or
on.
I think I remember reading like one interpretation that it was, Catcher in the Rye is this veiled war story in the form of a
I know
Lost Boys weekend.
parts of the story he had already written or was writing while he was fighting.
Mm-hmm.
He was. I know he was at what is it, Utah Beach on D-Day.
Wow.
So I'm sure he saw a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was probably in his 20s at the time.
Yeah.
And can you imagine? That's so young, and you go from your childhood
Exactly.
to seeing all of that devastation and violence and everything. And so, in a way, this is it's probably a cautionary tale that he wished maybe he could write to himself.
Exactly.
As a young
That
child.
would put everything into perspective very quickly. So I can't imagine such a different time back then,
Yeah. I definitely want to make sure we talk about, because it's such a weird title, Catcher in the Rye.
Sure.
What does that mean?
So Catcher in the Rye, I think, is from the scene where he sort of daydreams about a poem that he is the catcher. Like, I think it was a Burns poem where he sees children going through the rye and coming to a cliff, and he's sort of the catcher, and he sees himself as the catcher in the rye, the protector of the children, the saver of innocence. But I think there was a scene where he's talking to Phoebe about that, and then Phoebe sort of corrects him about that, and
he misinterpreted
it, and
the poem.
It made him start crying. So yeah, it's a beautiful sort of sentiment. And I do remember too, there's this scene towards the end of the book too where he imagines himself like he's like walking down sort of Fifth Avenue to meet Phoebe, and he is like stepping off of the curb, right? And he sees himself like falling into this abyss, and he's like sort of in a way praying to his brother Allie to like save him, and he sort of goes into this daydream, and then he makes it to the other side of the street onto the curve, and he's like, oh, such a beautiful sentiment.
The Allie, did he feel like Allie did save him?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
No.
Yeah.
So my last question I always ask,
Yes.
and this might, and this is part of why I, getting into a little bit like why I want to do this podcast, because like as librarians, we know that every story is not for everyone.
Sure.
And I think that that books and stories always have value, but it depends on who the person is.
Sure.
So who would you recommend this book for?
Well, that's a good question. Who would I recommend this book for? I would say anyone that is perhaps interested in, J.D. Salinger. This is definitely the one to start with. Anyone that would be interested in sort of, 1950s, sort of New York, sort of, it reminds me a lot of sort of like the Wes Anderson movies, so
Yeah.
I would say that movie Rushmore is heavily influenced by Catcher in the Rye. It's about, a person that's getting expelled from a prep school.
Right. But he's out, like, is he in the Midwest in Rushmore?
I don't know.
I don't remember
exactly where Rushmore is, but now I'm remembering that Bill Murray's in that movie, and like that was kind of like a movie that gave him like a renaissance in a way. Such a great movie.
It is a good movie.
Someone that's interested in sort of catching up on American classics, like we were saying, I think it's put on a lot of American classics lists. Anyone that's interested in that idea of struggling. Going from adolescence to adulthood, being a catcher in the rye themselves.
Yeah.
I think, I feel this is a book too, though, like, if you read it as an adult and didn't catch it as a child or a younger person, you know you're going to be immediately turned off by his sort of demeanor, and you know you're just just a snotty he's a snotty kid, he's a bratty kid,
Yeah.
he can't make up his mind. But like I said, like rereading it, it really took me back to that time, and you know I hate to say I was that Holden Caulfield, and I feel a lot of people, if they read it sort of at that right time, can really associate with that. And if you read it at a different time, you're just like, this kid is really just annoying and needs like some professional help. But he really was struggling, and he really did care. And my favorite thing about this book, and I have to talk about it, is the ducks.
Okay.
I think this is one of the most beautiful things in American literature. It comes up 2 or 3 times in the story where I think it first comes up when he's being lectured by Mr. Spencer that first day.
The history teacher.
The history teacher, and he's being expelled, and you know he's getting this lecture, but he sort of starts to drift off and starts thinking about Central Park and where the ducks go in the winter.
Right.
And he's just really concerned about the ducks and the ducks' well-being during the wintertime, and where do they go and where they live. And I just thought that was, I don't really know what that means, but I just think that's one of the most beautiful sort of moments. And then he brings it up again when he first gets to New York in a taxi cab, I think. He brings it up, and the taxi driver just, like, kind of laughs him off. He's like, what are you thinking about? But he's, like, really concerned about these ducks. Side story, at my work, there is a little retention pond. And last spring, I first noticed these ducks. Like in the pond, and like it became part of my daily ritual. When I first get to work, typically I'm one of the first people there, so I'll drive by the retention pond, and I would drive by to see how my ducks were doing.
Aww.
And you know, I was immediately reminded of Catcher in the Rye, and you know, I was really sort of sad when they finally flew away for the season. But
Holden should have asked you what happened to the ducks.
But he was really concerned about where the ducks go. You know, he's that Catcher in the Rye, that protector. He's a protector of Phoebe, and
he goes and checks on he's checking on the ducks.
Yeah, he goes and he checks on the ducks. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That is a beautiful, and I like also, and you brought up Wes Anderson, and it's a very New York story.
Sure.
And I mean, I love New York City. I mean, I'm sure people don't like it.
Sure.
And I've only been there as a tourist, obviously. But there's something special about that. And I love, so I would say if you were like really into like learning about New York,
there's definitely an electricity about it, and then like sort of a grittiness to it. So there's that yin and yang of it. I've only been to New York one time, and you know, so that's probably another reason I was really enamored with it at first, is because New York sounded so alien to where I grew up. It was the farthest thing. You know, I grew up in a small town, so
yeah. And then also, like you were saying, like the Wes Anderson, so like the Royal Tenenbaums, which is also a very New York story.
Absolutely.
And I love that movie so much.
That is a great movie. That, like, yeah, and I feel like there's some, you know, we didn't talk about his other book, Franny and Zoe, but I feel there's some Franny and Zoe elements in that book.
Yeah.
There's like a whole, I remember there was like a bathtub scene.
Yeah, with
in
Margot.
Franny and Zoe, and there's a bathtub in that.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
And about the family, like Franny's always about the Glass family, right? You know, and they're these sort of childhood, weren't they like, they were like childhood geniuses, just like the Tenenbaums, who were like that fall from grace. So
yeah. So I would definitely say this is a good recommendation for Wes Anderson lovers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there? So you have really brought a lot of stuff to this that I'm loving and was not planned for.
That's sort of my that's the way I do. I just bring a little bit of abstract to it. You know, I definitely wanted to talk about the cover and the first sentences, last sentences.
Yeah.
You know, this is such a funny book. Like I love reading now. I really do, you know. So to pick a favorite book, this is in the top. it's in the top just because I feel it set my trajectory with reading. Like I fell in love with like when you read, it can take you somewhere, and it's it take you somewhere like nothing else can, like music or a movie or a person, and to give you these feelings. And I just I left it like, what else is out there?
Yeah.
And I just started a career sort of reading. Like, it's just my favorite thing to do is to sit and listen to records and read a book and, connect with another human being about whatever it is they're trying to say.
Kudos to Salinger for writing this and, to speaking to you at that age. And like you said, sort of changed the trajectory of your life, and it gave you a lot of value that you get now from reading.
Yeah. Whenever I'm in the library and I see a copy of it just like on the shelf or, on display or wherever, I just kind of give it a nod. Do you ever do that? Like, books that you really enjoy, just give it a nod.
Yeah, I'll usually put them, I'll give them a face out. I'm like, oh, you're going faced out. Well, and I love, and I actually, it's sort of like happenstance. I have right here written down when I planned on this podcast I wrote down my mission.
Yes.
And I've actually never said it on air before. So, the first one is to tell stories and enable others to tell their stories. And 2 is to inspire reading in a way that is fun and accessible to non-readers.
There you go.
So there you go.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Anyway, but yeah, like I said, is there anything else you want to throw in about it before I wrap it up?
I can't really.
Okay.
Anything. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed talking about this book with you, and
cool.
Thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully this will inspire someone like it did.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really beautiful. So, and I also really enjoyed this, James. It's always fun when we hang out.
That's right, absolutely.
For sure.
Known each other a while. So,
yeah.
And honestly, I don't know if we've had this deep conversation of a book
like
this. So that's awesome.
We should do it again.
We should, absolutely.
We'll get another type of beer and we'll give it a try.
Cool.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up. So, awesome.
Thank you.
That was another episode of Drinks in the Library. Thank you for joining us today. I wanted to remind everyone that Richmond Magazine is doing their Best of 2024. Voting is going on until April 26th. So if you are so inclined, please vote for Drinks in the Library as Best Podcast. Other than that, you can find me on drinksinthelibrary.com, on Instagram at drinksinthelibrary, or shoot me an email, drinkspod@gmail.com. Thanks.